Congratulations on the purchase of your new dehydrator. You now own a fine piece of equipment that will serve your food preservation needs. This unit contains 10 shelves to allow you to dehydrate lots of food at one time. It comes equipped with an easy-to-read, continuously variable temperature control and a drying guide that helps you select the proper temperatures required for the successful drying of all kinds of foods. When heated air is blown across the food, evaporation takes place. The moisture from the food is absorbed by the dry air. The heat source and fan on this unit are located on the rear of the unit instead of at the bottom to allow a horizontal flow across all the trays from back to front, ensuring uniform drying of the food with minimal tray rotation. This properly seals the food surface to reduce the loss of nutrition, flavor, and color. The aim of dehydration is to reduce the moisture content of food to between 5 and 20%, a range where decay-causing bacteria cannot survive. Unlike canned or frozen foods, properly dehydrated foods can last for months without refrigeration, while minimizing the loss of enzymes. Dehydration suspends the action of enzymes that are found in all living things and puts them in a state of inactivity until the food is rehydrated. Fruits and vegetables are among the easiest foods to dehydrate, especially for the beginner. Select fresh, firm, clean foods free of bruises or blemishes. Fruits and vegetables picked at their peak of ripeness will have more flavor and nutrition. In addition to fruits and vegetables, meats, fish, herbs, cheeses, tofu, yogurt, and anything that has water in it can be dehydrated. Fruit and vegetable leathers, dried soup mixes, jerky, sprouted grain breads, and other non-cooked foods can be made with your dehydrator. By drying food instead of storing it fresh, most nutritional losses can be minimized. The higher the temperatures used during processing, the more nutrients are lost. Although dehydration uses heat, it requires it at a much lower temperature than does cooking, usually not over 145 degrees. The effect of water removal on nutrition of dehydrated foods is that some vitamin A and C are lost during dehydration, but this can be kept to a minimum with proper pre-treatment. Dehydrated food must be properly handled and prepared, then dried, packaged, and stored under appropriate conditions and used within 1 year. Minimizing exposure to moisture and oxygen and storing the food in cool temperatures will contribute to its longevity and vitality. On this video, we are going to demonstrate some basic principles that will get you going on your new journey. Some things that you'll need will include vegetable cutting devices, like knives, grater, and possibly a food processor. Other utensils include a cutting board, a corer, a pitter, a peeler, a strainer, a blender, parchment paper, plastic wrap, different containers, a vacuum sealing machine, and silica gel. Select seasonal produce, preferably local and organically grown. The next step includes washing and drying food, then cutting, peeling, and coring if necessary, dipping, blanching, marinating, or otherwise preparing the food. Humidity and temperature of the air, water content of the food, size and thickness of the food, and the quality of the dehydrator determines the length of time required to dehydrate food. Air must be kept in motion. Stagnant air holds on to as much moisture as it can, then drying no longer takes place. If the air contains 60% humidity rather than 80% humidity, food will dry in a shorter time. Temperature should be high enough to evaporate moisture from the food, but not cook it. Food should be dried as quickly as possible, yet not so fast that case hardening occurs. Case hardening occurs when the temperature cooks the outside of the food and traps moisture in the center. The moisture can't escape. This will cause a flat, sour taste, and the trapped moisture contributes to bacterial and fungal growth. Adhering to the following settings will keep you in the right temperature zone. Herbs, 95 degrees. Raw and living foods, 105 degrees. Raising breads, 110 degrees. Making yogurt, 115 degrees. Vegetables, 120 to 135 degrees. Fruit and fruit rolls, 135 to 145 degrees. Meats and fish, 145 to 155 degrees. And jerky, 155 degrees. You can experiment with temperatures. 10 to 15 degrees lower on some foods will provide a higher quality product, but need a longer drying time. This does not apply to fish, meats, fowl, or dairy products. Various foods contain different water content. The average tomato contains 94% water. A 1/4 inch thick cut of food will dry faster than a 3/4 inch thick cut. For foods to dry uniformly, they should be cut uniformly. Rotation of the top and bottom trays with the middle trays periodically will contribute to even drying throughout the dehydrator. The more efficient your dehydrator is, less time is required, and the food is more nutritious. Food should be dry enough to prevent microbial growth and subsequent spoilage. The safe maximum percentages of water remaining in home-dried produce should be no more than 10% for vegetables and no more than 20% for fruits. Most experts feel that for best storage, the percentage of water should be as follows. Fruits, 10%. Vegetables, 5%. Grains, 10 to 12%. Meats, 20%. Testing can mainly be achieved through look, feel, and taste. Upon removal from the trays, allow it to cool, then cut through the center. There should be no signs of moisture. A darker, wet center indicates the need for further dehydration. It is usually better to over-dry than to under-dry. When in doubt, dry for an additional period. Fruit is considered adequately dried when it has become somewhat tough and pliable, and when a few pieces squeezed together fall apart when the pressure is released. The fruit will be suede-like or leathery and sometimes can be slightly sticky. Vegetables are generally brittle or tough to brittle when they're dry enough. Tomatoes, which are really a fruit, are leathery to the touch. Corn or peas will shatter when you hit them with a hammer. All your work will go to waste unless you package and store your dehydrated food properly. Proper post-dehydration care will preserve the quality of the food and lengthen its shelf life. Storage containers should be firm and have tight-fitting lids. You can recycle old glass containers. Dark glass jars are considered best because it blocks light's harmful effects on the food. Heavy-duty self-sealing bags, as well as those that are used with the sealing machine, can be used. Squeezing the pouch tightly against the food will help force air out before sealing the bag. Small containers are better to use than large ones, as each time you open it, you will let in less oxygen and moisture that you would in a large container. Also, make sure that the food is completely cooled before you package it. Packaging food while warm is a definite no-no because the heat causes condensation to form on the inside of the container, which will eventually result in mold forming on the food. But do package the food as soon as it is cooled to prevent any moisture from being absorbed back into the food. You can leave the food in the dehydrator to cool, but make sure the unit is turned off. It should be cool in 30 to 60 minutes. To further protect the food from moisture, you can add silica gel packets to the containers to absorb additional moisture. Label the containers with the drying date on the containers. Cool, dark, and dry containers are ideal for storage. Food held in storage at 50 to 60 degrees retains more food value than when stored at higher temperatures. The absence of light in the storage area preserves color and vitamins. Check for moisture in the storage container several times during the first week after the food has been dried. If moisture appears on the inside of the storage container when the contents are shaken, put the food back in the dehydrator and let it dry for an additional period. Rotate your collection of stored food, using the oldest ones first. Try to store each year's harvest to carry over until the next year's harvest is available. Rehydration, or reconstituting, is when you add water back to the dehydrated food prior to use. Not all dehydrated food requires rehydrating. Dried fruit, fruit leather, and meat jerky can be eaten as it is. Dried vegetables can be eaten as chips with various dips, or they can be powdered, flaked, shredded, or chopped and added to soups and other dishes. Herbs can also be added to foods without rehydration. There are several methods for rehydrating foods, including soaking in water, placing in boiling water, and cooking. Generally, 2 cups of food can be rehydrated with 1 cup of liquid. If necessary, gradually add more liquid until the desired texture is obtained and the food won't absorb any additional liquid. Use only enough water as the food will absorb, as over-soaking produces flavor loss in a mushy, waterlogged product. Other than water, you can use cider, fruit juice, yogurt, cordials, fruit liqueur, bouillon, vegetable juice, milk, etc. for rehydration. Place 1 cup of vegetables into 1 cup of boiling water and soak for 5 to 20 minutes before using. Cooking requires gentle simmering in a liquid. Okay, we're going to start, before we dehydrate our food, we're going to start by washing it. And today we're going to do apples and onions. So we're going to use the ultrasonic food washer that we have. This is a pretty neat device. It does 3 things. It has ultrasonic frequencies that actually vibrate dirt off of the food without damaging it. It bubbles ozone gas through the water to break down any harmful chemicals that might be on the foods. And it has ions of silver embedded into the actual housing of this unit itself. So that sterilizes the food from any yeast, mold, fungus, bacteria, things like that that might be on the food. But normally you just put it in the sink. It's real easy to use. Okay, you can see the ultrasonic transducer on the bottom, and there's little holes around in this black circle that emits the ozone. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this basket full of apples and onions. We're going to place it down into it and put the top on. This keeps it down under the water level. And what I'm going to do is plug it in over here, and then we'll turn it on and just push the turbo button so it lights up, and we'll select our mode. So this is going to be, we'll do 10 minutes, and the turbo is on and the sterilize. So it's going to vibrate, it's going to create ozone, and then the silver ions that are in the housing will be transferred into the water to sterilize the water, and any bad stuff that you don't want will be removed. So this cycles on and off, goes through. I've got it set for 10 minutes, and it'll beep you and let you know that it's done. And then there's a drain in the bottom. You just drain it out, put in another load of food if you need to, or just dry it and put it away. This is a really handy feature. Now you could do the same thing in the sink. You could use a scrub brush in the water. You could put a little bit of Clorox bleach in a sink full of water to sterilize and oxygenate the water. Tends to freshen it up a little bit. But you can do it all in this neat device in one push of a button. All right, we've gone through our 10-minute cycle, and now we're ready to bring our basket out and drain the water off the food. We'll just place this on a towel, and then we'll be ready for our next step in the food preparation.
Okay, now your food has been washed and we're ready to start cutting it. It's very important when you're cutting your food to use uniform slices. So let's take this apple, cut it. I'm just going to cut right through the core. You can core and peel these if you'd like. But I want to show you a couple tricks when you get to like an end of the food, so you want to keep it uniform. So lay it down and then just slice it through, and we can do that with our first piece, and then line these all up on your dehydrator tray. Now it's important to have uniform slices to aid in the drying time. If the slices are too large, they won't dry completely, and you might have mold when you go to dry your foods. Now, with our onions, if we keep this bottom part intact when you cut it, you reduce a lot of the tears that are formed when you cut the onions. So another little trick is to cut a small piece off the bottom to set it level, and then go ahead and make uniform cuts. It's also important to have a nice knife and a sharp knife, one that you feel comfortable with. Now, if you're going to process a lot of food, it might be worth getting a food processor and using that to process quicker and more uniformly than with a knife. Quite a bit faster. So a little bit of prep work is needed to get your onion ready, or whatever you're putting through your food processor. Cutting it to the size of the hopper is a must. That way it'll fit right down in there. And let's do a few of them. Now these pieces here I'll save for dinner or soup. or we can dehydrate those separately. All right. We cut the side, cut the other side, and then cut that. Let's do another one. Cut the side, cut the side, cut the back. Prep that. Okay, those look good. And let's turn it on and cut some more of these onions. All right, now let's put the rest of these on our tray. We'll go ahead and proceed with the apples and get going on dehydrating. Okay, let's spread these onions out. This will have more even drying surface. One thing about drying onions is you might want to put this in a separate room or outside because there are quite a bit of fumes that are emitted with the onions. Okay, so we'll finish putting these on the tray and then we'll go ahead and start our dehydrator. I like to make soup mixes with a lot of the onions. You could also make a soup mix on your tray by having onions, carrots, celery, garlic, and then after that whole tray or several trays dry, you can store that in a container for soup mix or powderize it and use it as a powder. Another method for processing your food is a grater. I like the ones with the large holes that are easy to grate. This is easy on your hand to hold. So if you have carrots, say, or zucchini, you can just shred those and then spread that out on your trays to dry as well. You can also cut and dry your own herbs. Here is a whole bunch of parsley. I also like to dry basil and oregano. Just give it a quick chop all the way through and place it on this mesh on top of the tray so it doesn't fall through. Spread it out evenly and place it in the dehydrator. Another thing you can make with your dehydrator are fruit leathers, and you can take slightly overripe fruit or excess fruit, and here I'm going to use these bananas and some blueberries, blend them together and put it out on a dehydrator tray and let it dry. I'll show you another couple of treats you can do a little different to them. And this is sort of just intuition, what you really like. After you make a few, you can get an idea. You might like more of the banana, it makes a different texture, or you might like more of another kind of fruit. So just experiment with that. So we're gonna go ahead and turn this on. This is our Vitamix we're using to blend puree these fruits together. Okay, that looks about right. Now, I'm going to move this out of our way. And this is a solid piece that you can buy additionally to put on your dehydrator trays. You could also use parchment paper or plastic wrap. I'll go ahead and use this one. I'll take about 3/4 to a full cup, depending on how thick you like it, of this puree. And we'll go ahead and pour it. We'll start with 3/4. We can always add a little bit more. Now we're going to spread it out. Well, it looks like a couple banana pieces didn't get totally blended, but that'll be nice. A little chewiness. Now you want to make it thinner in the center and thicker out at the edges so it dries more evenly. Approximately 1/4 inch on the outside, maybe 1/8 inch on the inside. Let's add that little bit more. And you want to touch these a few times with your finger as they dry to see all the sticky tackiness is gone. It'll probably be just a little bit tacky depending on what kind of fruit you use, but it won't be wet feeling. Okay, again, just spread out a little bit more from the center toward the edges. Okay, I'm going to show you another little thing you can do with this fruit leather. Let's use the parchment paper. You can make little rounds. These can be just little individual desserts where the whole roll of, or the whole fruit leather can be rolled up and eaten as it is. But these you can make a little fancier. Let's just use that. And sprinkle different condiments on them. Let's just spread them out just a little bit. You can make these whatever size you like. We're going to use a little bit of coconut on some. You can use some chopped nuts or seeds on them. You can add these like this, or you can get them even finer. Depends on if you like them chewy or a little bit more of a dusting. So this is just another little treat you can do. And we'll go ahead and put these in our dehydrator.
Pre-treatments prevent fruit from browning when being peeled or cut, and during storage, and prepare the food for optimal drying. This involves several different processes, such as blanching, including both water blanching or checking, and steam blanching, as well as dipping. Blanching, also known as parboiling, is a hot water or steam direct scalding treatment of certain raw foodstuffs to inactivate enzymes which otherwise might affect color, texture, and particularly flavor during processing or storage. It's also a great way of loosening the skins from items like tomatoes, nectarines, and peaches, making a subsequent peeling a breeze. Blanching reduces the number of microorganisms that cause spoilage in the food, stops destructive chemical changes, preserves color, stops the ripening process, and generally makes the produce dry faster. The drying time is reduced because the outer skin becomes more porous. Blanching time must be controlled to minimize nutritional losses and destruction of food cells. Use enough heat to stop microorganisms and inactivate certain enzymes, but not too much to cause a loss of nutrition. Vegetables with a long cooking time, including carrots, corn, beans, potatoes, etc., should be blanched to stop the enzyme action that causes flavor loss. There are vegetables with a short cooking time, including mushrooms, onions, peppers, tomatoes, or zucchini, that don't require this form of pre-treatment. Nature provides a wax-like coating on the skins of cherries, figs, grapes, plums, and certain firm berries like blueberries. They all dry better if this waterproofing substance is removed beforehand. If these tough skins are cracked minutely in many places, called checking, internal moisture can be drawn through to the surface for evaporation, thus reducing loss of nutrition. A 30 to 60 second immersion in boiling water, followed by immersion in very cold water, is required for de-waxing and checking of tough skin fruits. Water blanching is like checking, except for a longer amount of time. Foods are briefly placed in boiling water for 2 to 5 minutes, and then they're submerged in a bowl of ice water to stop the cooking process. Plunge the food with tough skins into boiling water to burst the skin. This allows internal moisture to escape during drying. Bring several inches of water to a boil in a large pot with a tight-fitting lid. Place the prepared food not more than 2 inches deep in a steamer pan or wire basket over, not touching the boiling water. Cover it and begin timing it immediately. 1 to 3 minutes is all that's needed. Halfway through the blanching time, stir, turn, or separate the food to ensure an even heat treatment to all pieces. This method is preferred over water blanching as there are no or fewer nutritional losses. Dipping is a treatment to prevent light-colored foods like apricots, bananas, and apples from turning darker or oxidizing as the fruit is exposed to oxygen in the air. Antioxidants such as lemon, lime, or pineapple juice, ascorbic acid, and honey or sugar can be used as dipping solutions. Only use the dip for 2 batches though, as the potency of the solution diminishes. After pre-treating, drain the fruit. Blot with paper towels. Stir 1 cup of lemon or lime juice into a quart of lukewarm water. Dip the food 8 to 10 minutes, then drain it. Fruit juice is only 1/6 as effective as ascorbic acid and has the disadvantage of imparting a slight tart taste. Pineapple juice can be substituted for lemon or lime juice and is not as tart. Use juice naturally high in vitamin C, like orange, lemon, pineapple, grape, or cranberry. As soon as the fruit is cut, add it to the juice. Soak the fruit no more than 3 to 5 minutes. Juice may be consumed after it's used. Mix 2 teaspoons of powdered or crystalline ascorbic acid or 6,000 milligrams of vitamin C tablets. That would be 6 grams of vitamin C tablets, crushed into 1 quart of cool water. Add the food to the solution as soon as it is cut. Soak for at least 10 minutes or longer, but no more than 1 hour. There are commercial anti-browning products for dipping. Use these according to the package directions. As soon as the fruit is cut, add it to the solution. Soak the fruit no more than 3 to 5 minutes. In general, food temperature is about 20 degrees cooler than air temperature. Therefore, if you set the temperature dial at 105 degrees, you're setting it to hold the food temperature at around 105 degrees Fahrenheit. The air temperature may get as high as 125 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the moisture content of the food. The reason the food temperature is cooler is because of evaporation. As the moisture on the surface of the food evaporates, it cools the food, keeping it about 20 degrees cooler than the air temperature in the dehydrator. In order to preserve the enzymes and reduce the risk of mold and bacteria, it's necessary to have a wide fluctuation in temperature. Because enzymes and microorganisms both thrive at the same temperature, you must be able to accomplish two things at once. Keep the food temperatures low enough not to harm the enzymes, and elevate the air temperature high enough to remove the moisture quickly to stop the growth of mold or bacteria. The wide fluctuation in temperatures accomplishes just that. As the air temperature rapidly rises to its high point, moisture is quickly evaporated off the surface of the food, and as the temperature lowers, the drier surface pulls moisture from the center of the food and becomes saturated again. Because of the continuous up and down fluctuation in air temperature and constant evaporation, the food temperature remains constant at a lower temperature. After all the moisture is evaporated out of the food temperature will rise and then equalize somewhere in the middle of the air temperature fluctuation. Once the food temperature rises, one might get worried and think the enzymes are dead, or if he or she doesn't understand the third critical aspect, which is that every enzyme is different and some are more stable at higher temperatures than others. But most enzymes will not become completely inactive until food temperatures exceed 140 degrees to 158 degrees Fahrenheit in a wet state. Therefore, once the food is dehydrated, the enzymes have become dormant and can withstand much higher temperatures. Because of the difference in food temperature and air temperature, it is safe to dehydrate at dial settings of up to 145 degrees Fahrenheit for the first several hours. The food temperature will never exceed 118 degrees because of the high moisture content in the food. Neither will the air temperature immediately rise to 145 degrees. It may take several hours to get up to that high because there's so much moisture in the air. After 2 to 3 hours, the temperature should be turned down to a lower setting, around 105 degrees, for the remaining time. For example, drying apples at 105 degrees can take 10 to 12 hours to dry. Drying apples at 145 degrees for 2 hours, then reducing to 105 degrees, can take 8 to 9 hours. Following this procedure will dramatically shorten the lengthy drying time it takes, sometimes up to 30 plus hours, to dehydrate raw foods, and will decrease the potential of mold or bacteria from growing on the food. Drying at very low temperatures for extended periods of time can cause bacterial and mold growth, so it's important to speed up the drying time if possible.
Here's our food that we dehydrated. The parsley took the shortest amount of time, about 4 hours. And now we're ready to use it in our spice rack. Put it in a bottle, maybe label it yourself. Here's our onions. You can see these are really nice and golden in color, nice and dry. You can hear them, how crispy they are. So this is ready for soups or just putting in foods to flavor it. You can chop them up and use them as your own spicing. Over here's our apples. And because we didn't do anything to these, any other form of pre-treatment, you can see that they're a little bit oxidized in color, but they're still edible, very good. And back here are our fruit leathers. Here's the one big fruit leather we put on the sheet. So this is ready to eat. And then our other little fruit leather snacks, you could just pull them off this parchment paper.
In this section, we'll be using sprouted nuts, seeds, and grains when we make crackers, cookies, and breads. And you'll see several ingredients here. We have sesame seeds, almonds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, and over here are oat groats. And we'll be using these to make crackers and cookies and breads. So when you start the sprouting process, you'll be initiating germination. And when the foods start to sprout, you get rid of the phytates and the enzyme inhibitors, which make it hard to digest these foods. The different ingredients require approximately 4 to 12 hours soaking time. Flax seeds are probably the shortest soaking time, about 2 to 4 hours. Nuts and seeds range from 4 to 6 hours normally. And grains are usually longer, about 6 to 12 hours. This enables them to have time enough to absorb the water and start to germinate. So now we're going to clear our area and make some crackers. Okay, we're ready to make some flaxseed vegetable crackers. We have a cup of flax seeds here, and we have 2 cups of corn. And you can use all flax seeds with some flavorings like salt and chili powder, cumin, and just spread that out on your sheets and dehydrate those. Or you can make them more interesting by adding different vegetables. And today we're going to use this nice fresh corn and a few little sweet peppers. So we're going to use our twin gear juicer and alternately put in the flax seeds and the corn and the peppers. And then we'll finish with that and mix in our spicing and spread it on our sheets and dehydrate it. So here we go. Go ahead and put some of the corn in. And some of our flax seeds. There we go. More of our corn. I like to do it alternately because it seems to mix better. Sometimes the seeds get a little gooey and it backs up in the juicer. So if you do it back and forth with your vegetable, the vegetable, because it has the different type of fiber, seems to push the flax seeds through. And then we'll go ahead and put one of the peppers in. And some more of the flax seeds. Now this juicer has a blank instead of a juicing screen, and that forces all of the ingredients out the end instead of separating them like the juicing screen does. Go ahead and put another pepper in. And we'll go ahead and add the rest of our corn. Take the rest of our flax seeds and use this last pepper to push it all through. And we can see the pepper starting to come out, so we know we're at the end and it's all gone through the juicer. There's probably just going to be a little bit that drips out. We'll go ahead and stop it. And then we'll take our mixture here and go ahead and add some sea salt. And this was, again, 2 cups of the corn or any kind of vegetable that you like. Carrots are good, celery's good. You could put a little onion or garlic in there. Zucchini is another good vegetable. And I like to use about 1/2 teaspoon of Celtic sea salt. You can add a little more, a little less, depending on your liking. And a few of the spices that I picked today are cumin and chili powder. And I'm using about 1 teaspoon each. We'll go ahead and sprinkle those in. Now you can also add dulse or kelp flakes or powder, and that will add more nutrition and get in some good seaweeds and also make it a little bit drier. For different spicing, you can add ground olives. We can put in some different nuts in here too, or seeds. We can put in the sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds. It's kind of no end to the amount of variation that you can make with these. All right, we've mixed this up. And now we're going to spread this on our sheet. You can use these little sheets or you can use parchment paper. And remember, the thinner you spread this, the quicker it'll dry and the crispier cracker you can make. Now you can make little flat breads and make them a little bit thicker so that you can use this instead of wheat bread or any kind of baked bread. We'll go ahead and spread this out. Use this whole sheet. Now also what I like to do with this, since this is very wet, we'll dehydrate it, we'll start to dehydrate it and then flip it over, and we'll flip it right onto, we'll actually flip it off the sheet onto the tray, so that way more air will dry it. And then we can also score it once we flip it over while it's still a little bit wet. You can take a knife and just make some scores in it like this. See, now it's too wet, it won't really work, but you get the idea. And this way, when they're finished, they're easy to break off into nice uniform pieces. So if, again, we're making the crackers, keep these thin about, oh, it kind of makes its own level here. I would say that's probably about 1/8 of an inch, approximately. And we'll start the dehydration process at about 110, 115 for maybe a half hour to an hour, and then turn it down. We'll check it at that time. If it's still really tacky, we'll let it go a little bit more. If it's able to pull away from the sheet, then we'll flip it over onto the tray and let it dehydrate some more. And again, test it. You can always take a little piece off and taste it to see if it's crunchy or is crunchy to your liking, or if it's a little bit more pliable. Both ways are very good. If you leave it a little bit more pliable, it can be a very good substitute for a bread. Otherwise, you can dry it very crisp for a cracker. We'll go ahead and do that. Now we're going to make a little bit of a variation on the same crackers that we just did. We're going to take the rest of that batter, the half of it, and we'll put through the juicer some of the soaked sunflower seeds and some soaked almonds. And we'll also add a little bit more salt and some seaweed powder. I have a blend of both kelp and dulse, and this is about 1.5 tablespoons. So we're going to go ahead and put these through. Yeah, looks like the rest of our pepper coming out there. There's always a little bit caught in those blades. getting those gears. And moving it through. And the rest of our ingredients, those almonds. See the sunflowers coming through. Those seeds have ground up really nice. And then you'll get the change of color in the almonds. And you can see some of the skins coming through. There we are. There we go. Looks like those gears are clean. We'll go ahead and turn it off. And then we'll add in our sea salt and our seaweeds, kelp and dulse. That also helps to firm the batter up a little bit. And we'll mix them together. You could just take your rubber spatula and sort of smash that in. This is a great mixing tool for these raw crackers. And this is going to make a different texture and of course a different taste. It'll be a little creamier. All right, that looks good. We'll go ahead and spread that out on our sheet and dry that one with the rest. We'll put that all on here and spread this out. You can see that this is a more firm batter. And again, you can do the same thing halfway through drying or whenever you can bring it away from the sheet, flip it over, and then score the sides. If you forget to score them or don't want to, that's fine. You can always just break them when they're finished. And they're still delicious. It's great served with salsa or different raw pâtés or just out of the cupboard. They don't last that long in our house, but they will last quite a while if they're dried to a nice crisp finish. Okay, this looks pretty good. Yeah, we'll go ahead and put this in and get these going as well. All right, now we're ready to make a raw or living cookie. And we'll use our oat groats. And basically an oat groat is an oat seed. There's nothing special about it other than it's not processed yet. So these we soaked about 10 hours. And you can see them here. Okay. So we're going to use, basically you can use about any proportion. You'll just have a little difference in the sweetness and the consistency, but for sake of some place to start, we're going to go 2 to 1. So twice as much oats to 1 part of soaked dates. And if your dates are fresh, you don't need to soak them. If they're a little bit dehydrated, soak them to hydrate them a little bit. And then we'll also use some of the apples that we dehydrated. We just put them in the date soak water for a few minutes. And you can see they're still kind of hard, but they just have softened a little bit here. So we'll put these through the juicer as well, and then mix them with some of our sunflower seeds that we sprouted. And we also have some raisins, both the blonde raisins and the dark raisins. And then our spicing will be a pinch of salt. This is an official pinch. And this is a teaspoon of cinnamon. You can also use nutmeg or ginger, or also fresh ginger, as well as a ginger powder. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing we did with our crackers, alternating the ingredients as we put them through the juicer. We'll start with the ingredient that we have most of. Let them start. We'll go ahead and move those in. And then put in a date. Here we go. Get another date and let's put in a couple of these apples. There we go. Sometimes it's nice to do it just by the handful. And you want to process this kind of slow because it's very thick ingredients and you don't want to burn out your motor. You can sometimes hear the motor slow down, and that just means to back off a little bit. As those gears rotate, they will move the ingredients through, and then just go ahead and push that down before you add something else. And you can see the date coming through right here. Sometimes when you're putting the oats through, the batter gets a little dry, so go ahead and put in some of your soak water for either the oats, if you've changed it, or for the dates. Put a little bit of the water in. You see it loosens it up and it helps it go through your juicer easier. Apples. Almost done. So a little bit of the water helps to push that through. When you sprout the grain and you grind it into the dough, you miss the whole process of having to mill it into a flour. And it keeps a lot of the vitality intact, making it easier to digest also. Just keep it hydrated. Last few dates. All right. Now, take our ingredients and start mixing them together to get the fruit and the oat groats mixed evenly. Okay, we'll go ahead and add our pinch of sea salt, our official pinch, and our cinnamon. These smell wonderful when they're dehydrating, by the way, just like when you bake cookies. Okay, now I'm going to add our soaked sunflower seeds and our raisins. You can put whatever kind of nut or seed you like. Walnuts are good, pecans are very good. You can also add coconut flakes if you like them. We can add more fruit to the oat ratio if you like it a little sweeter. This is taking the place of sugars. If you want to cut back a little bit on the amount of sweet, you can always add stevia to this or xylitol. And it'll still be nice and sweet. All right, now we'll take our dehydrator tray with the mesh on it. You can also use it with the solid sheet, but this seems to dry better. There's a few ways you can do this. You can drop this on like drop cookies. Like that. Which is probably the easiest way. And once you have those on there, you can take something and flatten them out just a little bit here. So flatten these out so they fit in. Plus, they'll be a little bit easier to dehydrate if they're flatter rather than mounded up. They'll take less time. Another thing you can do is, I'll just show you an easy way. Take some of your dough, like this, and you put it out on your cutting board, and then just cut off a little bit there. Like that. Or you can just spread them out on your sheet as well and cut them like we did the crackers, just making them a little bit thicker. So this also, I like to dry a little bit at higher temperatures at first and then turn it down. You can start it at about 120, 125 or 130 for maybe half hour to an hour, and then turn it down to about 105 and dry these approximately 8 hours.
Again, that's the air temperature, not the food temperature.
Again, that's again, that's the air temperature, not the food temperature. Again, that's the air temperature, not the food temperature. All right, so we put these out and go ahead and dehydrate these. And have a yummy treat. Now we're going to make some dehydrated cereal, and we'll be using some of the apples and papayas that we dehydrated along with the soaked sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, almonds, a little bit of the flax, some sesame seeds, and also some dates. So we're going to use our food processor and start pulsing the dried fruits first. I'm going to go ahead and just add these in here to chop them up. Then we'll go ahead and add also our soaked dates. There we go. Okay, I'm going to turn that on and go ahead and start adding some of the other ingredients here. Here's our flax seeds. Almonds. Sunflower seeds. Pumpkin seeds. And some sesame seeds. Okay, we kind of want a cross between chopped up and a slurry, so we might have to just open this and just move everything around a little bit so it gets mixed up well. And we want this a little bit chunky and not too wet, not too ground up. Do a little bit more. Stir it again. It's looking really good. So keep watching it to get it to your desired consistency. Basically, we want a lot of the almonds chopped up. If there's a few little chunks, that's fine. And your dried fruit, especially the apples or the longer pieces, a little bit broken up. One more time, we should be good to go. That looks good. Now, we'll take this off, move this out of the way. Take our blade out. Now, while it's in here, go ahead and add a little cinnamon to it. And just stir it in just a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and pour it onto our sheet. And then just spread this out. And we'll dehydrate this like we did our crackers. And we can break this up and use this as a fresh granola. So again, after it's about halfway dehydrated or it gets a little bit more firm, we might want to flip it so the other side can get more airflow to it. Okay. Okay, we're back. We've been dehydrating all these foods that we prepared, and it's been about 20 hours. And about halfway through, we flipped over the trays and took off the paper and let them dry more thoroughly. All right, here's the first one that we did, which was the flax and corn cracker. So we didn't score it. I left it this way because I wanted to show you another way to work with it. You can either break them up or you can cut them into smaller pieces with your scissors. If you want a nice uniform, even cut, pretty much. Or it can just be broken into smaller pieces like that. Okay, next one is the one that we did with the almonds and the seaweed. You see it's just a little different color. And again, when they're a little bit more brittle, they're harder to cut, but you can cut them. They're just not quite as even. Or again, you can break them like that into smaller pieces. Like so. Okay. Then we have our cookies. And these are really nice. We kept checking them throughout and giving them a little taste test. And they're basically still a little soft. You can see they're soft, which is quite nice. They're chewy. The raisins that we put in them are very, very nice and soft and give it a good flavor, have a good cinnamon, good taste, and those are wonderful. And then the last one that we did was our breakfast cereal. You see, here's the full one, all the pieces. And again, this one you could either cut up or make it smaller by just doing like this, squeezing it and breaking it up this way. This way it's more like a breakfast cereal if you want to eat it that way. This would be good if you were to eat it like a cereal with some raw milk or some homemade almond milk. This is also wonderful as a snack. It's good for hiking. This is a great energy food. And it's very, very tasty. And again, all of these recipes can be varied by what you have on hand, what's in season, what your spices are that you like most, and how you put it together.
Dehydration of meats and fish to prevent spoilage has been done for a very long time. Early methods of curing meats included placing thin strips of meat out in the sun, smoking the meat over a fire, and using salt in several forms. The use of dehydrated meats and fish is not limited to just camping or outdoor activities anymore, but is being adopted by more and more people for storing leftovers, to store excessive quantities of meats, such as after a successful deer hunt or large fish catch, or just purchasing a larger than normal amount of these foods, such as a side of beef, or when it's available for an unusually affordable price. Cooked meat should be lean and then chilled before dehydrating. Chilling causes the fat to congeal, making it easy to remove. When working with any meats, sanitation and hygiene are very important considerations. The next step is to trim the meat and cut it into half-inch cubes. Evenly spread them on the trays and dehydrate at 145 degrees. Turning the temperature down to between 120 and 130 degrees toward the end of the drying cycle will help make the meat more tender. Make sure that the dehydrator runs continuously throughout the complete cycle to avoid spoilage. With most meats, you'll need at least 6 hours or maybe even up to 12 hours to obtain thorough drying. And it will be tough to hard when it's done. Any beads of oil that remain on the surface should be blotted before storage. To use the dried meats, soak it in a broth or water for 30 to 60 minutes. Then additional simmering for 10 to 20 minutes. When dehydrating beef or venison, trim as much of the fat as possible. If you're using ham, use lean, well-cured ham. Don't use duck or goose because the meat is too greasy and fatty, making it difficult to store. Another method of preserving meat is to make jerky from it. Jerky is only 1/4 the weight of raw meat. Because it's lightweight, easy to pack, and keeps without refrigeration, it's a staple of outdoor people while backpacking, hunting, fishing, camping, and skiing. But it can also be used for survival. Early explorers were some of the first to discover this method of saving leftover meat for use later. On their journeys, they observed native Indians cutting meat into long strips and drying them in the air in the sun. They called it charqui, which later became jerky. The Indians also made another dried meat preparation they called pemmican. To make it, they pounded dried meats and mixed it with dried fruits and vegetables and fat to bind it together. Although beef and venison are more popular, jerky can be made from nearly any fresh, frozen, or cooked meat. Various types of meat jerky are beef, lamb, ham, game, poultry, hamburger, and fish. The type of cure used to marinate the meat and infuse it with flavor will make it uniquely yours. Although there are many recipes available, it's fun to come up with your own creation. Jerky cures traditionally were centered around salt, but you can add many different ingredients to influence the flavor. They include tomato paste, Worcestershire sauce, tamari, barbecue sauce, red curry paste, curry powder, miso paste, chili powder, peppers, you name it. When making beef jerky, flank, round, and sirloin tip cuts are considered the best choices, as lower quality cuts contain more fat, giving you a higher percentage of unusable waste per pound. The best way to get uniform thickness is to use a slicer, but a sharp knife will do it if you partially freeze the meat before cutting it. You can slice the meat either with or across the grain. Jerky cut with the grain will be more chewy, and cut across the grain will be more tender and brittle. You cut the meat into strips 1 inch wide and 3/16 to 1/4 inch thick, and as long as you want, as long as can fit on the tray of the dehydrator. To better preserve your jerky, you can apply either a dry or a brine cure before drying. Dry cures are salt and seasoning mixtures rubbed into the meat surface. Brine cures or marinades combine water with the salt and seasoning, and the meat is soaked in the brine solution. Coarse pickling salt is often substituted for table salt, but rock salt should never be used as it contains contaminants. A good unprocessed sea salt is an excellent choice. Lay the strips of meat in a shallow container. Combine the marinade ingredients and pour over the meat strips and cover completely. Then refrigerate it for 6 to 12 hours. You can turn the strips over several times to thoroughly coat them. Place the strips on the trays and dry them at 145 degrees until they're leathery and pliable, approximately 4 to 8 hours. occasionally blotting the surface to remove excess fat droplets. The best way to compare properly dried jerky is with a green stick. When it's bent, it should crack but not break. Always test using a cool piece, as a warm one will be more pliable. When using lamb, it should be fresh and processed immediately. Use choice leg and shoulder cuts for best results, as lamb is generally fatty. Dry it at 145 degrees until it's leathery and pliable for approximately 8 to 12 hours. Cured ham is suitable for jerky. However, other forms of pork should not be dehydrated. The trichinella parasite and other harmful bacteria prevalent in pork are not destroyed by the dehydration temperatures. Use ham that is already cooked and processed, because this eliminates the need for any additional curing. Dry it at 145 degrees until the strips are hard and snap readily, approximately 5 to 5.5 hours. Game meat like deer, bear, and elk can all be made into jerky, though venison makes some of the best jerky because it has no marbling fat. Flank or round are the best cuts to use. Before drying, game meat should be frozen for 60 days at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, which should kill any disease-causing bacteria that may be present. Chicken or turkey jerky can be a great way to use up leftovers from Thanksgiving or other feasts. Since poultry is very fibrous, expect your jerky to be somewhat brittle. Dry the cooked poultry at 145 degrees for about 4 hours or until it's dehydrated throughout. Hamburger or other ground meat can be used to make an unusual jerky. Rather than curing, you just add spices, salt, flavorings, chopped dried onions, or other spices. This mixture is spread out on the tray on the inserts, an 1/8 inch thick. Dry it for 4 to 6 hours at 145 degrees. Then take out the trays and flip the jerky, removing the inserts, and then dry an additional 4 to 6 hours until it's hard and leathery. When drying fish, it's important that the fish is extremely fresh to prevent spoilage before it can be dried. Fish begin to deteriorate as soon as they're removed from the water, and hot and humid weather accelerates the process, so use freshly caught fish. Another important point is the oil content of fish. Fatty or oily fish spoil rapidly, and unlike meat, there's no simple way to trim the fat. To cure the fish, make up a cold brine solution made up of 3/4 of a cup of salt to 1.5 quarts of water. Marinate the fish for about a half an hour, then rinse them, and then coat them with any combination of salt and seasoning. Layer the coated fish in an airtight glass container and marinate in the refrigerator for 6 to 10 hours. If the fish is steamed first, there's no need to use the brine solution. Dry the fish at 145 degrees for 12 to 14 hours. Test the fish by squeezing a fleshy piece between your thumb and forefinger. It should leave no imprint. Properly dried fish is firm and tough. It should never be crunchy or crumbly. When you taste the fish, it should be mildly fishy. Notice any odor or taste of rancidity and discard these pieces. Shrimp can be dehydrated, either fresh or frozen. Frozen shrimp should be thawed before preparing. To prepare either frozen or fresh shrimp, combine 1.5 cups of salt to 2 quarts of water. Heat to boiling. Add the shrimp, cover, and let it come up to a boil. Then reduce the heat and simmer 1 to 3 minutes. The shrimp will turn pink when they're done. To dehydrate the shrimp, leave it as it is, or cut it into smaller pieces and dehydrate it at 145 degrees for 4 to 6 hours until the shrimp are hard and firm. Fast baking, slow or fast boiling, stewing, and frying all destroy 100% of the enzymes in food. Vigorous boiling takes place at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Frying is done at a much higher temperature. The thermal death point of protoplasm, or living matter, occurs at 118 degrees Fahrenheit. This same temperature also blisters the skin and prevents subsequent germination of seeds when they're immersed for a half an hour. Comparing 118 degrees with any of the cooking temperatures, you can see that the enzymes in foods have not the slightest chance of escaping destruction under any kind of kitchen heat or pasteurization. With dehydration, the temperature of the food doesn't reach these dangerous temperatures, even though the air temperature in the dehydrator may be much higher. Most researchers indicate that at least 50% loss of vitamin B in cooked or pasteurized foods. Some losses, such as thiamine, can be as high as 96% if food is boiled for a prolonged time. Biotin losses can be up to 72%, folic acid up to 97%, inositol up to 95%, vitamin C up to 70 to 80%. Cooked proteins have only 20% bioavailability compared to uncooked proteins. As other food quality factors decrease with time, foods also lose nutrients during storage and shipping. Exposure to light and heat breaks up the sensitive vitamin molecule. They are destroyed and cannot be regenerated. The antioxidant vitamins, especially vitamins E and C, are destroyed by oxygen in the air. Some nutrients are volatile and evaporate during normal drying. Proteins, including enzymes, which are just specialized proteins, can be segregated into those that are more heat stable or able to withstand a given degree of heat without the protein becoming denatured or unfolded, and those that are more heat labile. They unfold more easily upon exposure to extremes of heat. As this classification suggests, proteins normally exist in folded states in living systems. This means that proteins prefer to contort their amino acid chains into various curvatures that allow the proteins to achieve stable and functional conformations. These stable conformations can be disrupted or denatured by many environmental challenges, including heat extremes, acidity, which are pH changes, changes in the water or fat content of the solution in which the protein sits, and exposure to chemicals in solution. 6 of the 18 essential amino acids, phenylalanine, lysine, threonine, histidine, tryptophan, and methionine, are heat labile, meaning that when a certain amount of heat is applied, as in cooking or pasteurization, these particular amino acids are first denatured or unraveled, and then coagulated to an insoluble state in which they cannot be utilized by the body in the formation of polypeptide chains needed for cellular repair or replacement. Even the denaturation involves structural changes in the protein molecule, which results in a loss of species specificity. The denaturation alters viscosity, surface tension, and replicative utilization of biologically active proteins, which includes hemoglobins, myoglobins, and enzymes as well. Digestive enzymes attack denatured proteins much differently than undenatured proteins, and coagulation renders the protein irreversibly insoluble. So a source of raw protein with all the natural amino acids, such as you'll get with dehydration, is helpful, properly balanced, and readily available to the cells. Cooking or pasteurizing protein foods destroys 4/5 of the protein value. Heat, acids, trypsin, and hydrolysis all cleave polypeptide chains, which make up enzymes, the functional unit of cellular metabolism. As a result, some of the amino acids are denatured or lose their characteristic folding, and the important catalytic activity is lost. So cooking of protein foods prior to ingestion can further denature or unfold some of the amino acids required for cellular enzyme biosynthesis. Dehydration of protein foods will not have this effect. Vacuum sealing is a fast and efficient way to prolong the life and freshness of food. Preservation relies on taking away one or more of the elements that cause food to deteriorate. Vacuum sealing takes away the oxygen that microbes need in order to break down food. The benefit of removing air from a food package is the increased storage time of not only dehydrated foods, but even refrigerated and frozen foods. If air is not removed when food is put in a package or container, oxygen can cause fats to develop bad flavors and change the food's color. The vacuum sealer, such as this one here, is basically a small appliance that sucks the air out of a bag or a container, such as this, and then seals it. For bags, a heated strip in here actually melts the plastic sides together. Many attachments can be purchased with a vacuum sealer, including canisters, such as I showed you, jar sealers, lids, bottle stoppers, and of course bags, such as these. Vacuum sealing is a quick, simple way to prolong the life of your food. The vacuum sealer is generally used in conjunction with sealing bags. These bags usually come in rolls, such as this. The roll is actually one long continuous open bag, and then you can cut the bag. It has a built-in cutter that gets rolled along here, and you can cut the bag to the desired length. So you can cut the bag in the length needed for the item to be sealed. Place one end in the sealer here. I'll demonstrate this in a minute. And then you run the sealer through its entire cycle. First part of the cycle will run the vacuum. The second part seals the bag. When one side of the bag is sealed, fill it with the food to be stored, and then you place the open end into the sealer, press the button again, and the excess air will be removed and the bag will become flat and rigid. Then the bag will be sealed by the heated metal bar. This all happens automatically. When sealing a bag, be sure to place the bag evenly within the sealer so that the seal is continuous and complete. Accessories can also be purchased for the vacuum sealer